That's a good one. Yeah. Okay, so we'll get started if everybody's ready.
Right.
So our intention for today is to we're going to start off in small groups that we have a list. We've divided everybody up into 4 groups. So we'll walk through a small group discussion, and we'll take about 20 minutes to do that before coming back as a whole group and kind of sharing out. And Julie and I were talking about how would we do this maybe in real life. So when we have our class of 20 freshmen, if we wanted to start off in small groups as means of a warm-up to really get everybody talking, to really help that participation and get the ideas going. And we might structure it just to keep everybody accountable. We in that situation would only probably go for 10 minutes probably, and then come back together as a whole group to share out. But I think for us, maybe 20 minutes will be maybe even more helpful to get the ideas in our head that we can then push out into our classes. So there's 4 of us that are going to lead groups. So in Ginger's group, it's going to be Bill, Brian, and Jan. Julie's group is Martha, Daphne, and John. Eddie is going to have Ed, Nick, Sister, and Janet. And I will have David, Heidi, Sarah, and Matt.
Well, I just jotted down some notes from the talk, but I didn't really have any super prepared questions, but I pulled the 3 main ideas that he talked about, so maybe we could just kind of go through and talk about each one of the 3 things that he specifically wants to stress, and talk about each one of those. So the first one that he mentions is we all need each other, none of us is an island, and an autonomous and independent I separated from the other. We can only build a future standing together, including everyone. What did you interpret this to mean, and how do you see this operating?
Well, what I liked about that was, and it sort of really, I saw that as far as to do with, the course and liberal arts, and the purpose of what we're talking about is that everything that we do is connected, and we're all connected to each other. I mean, it ties in with everything that we've done, that all of our bodies of knowledge are connected, and they all inform each other. History needs science, needs theology, and just like we all need each other as well. Yeah, the integration. So
I like that. That's better than my thought was written like a true extrovert. But I like the idea of the going beyond the individual and the interactions and going to these different.
And the community, we talk about community of faith and scholarship, which is something we hear a lot about in college.
Yeah, and how all the pillars tie together. The sense of community with the rule, the residential ties in with the academic. It doesn't always.
You're right, not all the time.
Student life doesn't always tie in. It kind of conflicts with academics sometimes, when you're trying to organize things.
But is that that's maybe more of an issue? Priorities. Yeah. Well, I love the inclusion of the none of us is an island, because it's the John Donne quote from the John Donne sermon, which John Donne's and scholar
for Thomas Merton.
Yeah, it's a well-known thing, but no man is an island. He uses it in the sermon, and then it becomes this phrase that gets echoed.
No, I like to, maybe this goes into later, where it really brings about social inclusion, though. So not only are we not an island, but we need to make sure that no one's an island, right? That we bring everybody in. And maybe that goes into what you were saying too, bringing from all these different disciplines.
Yes, because he starts with the whole framing of the discussion is why them and not me, which is more of an issue of why was he comes from his family of immigrants, and he's talking about his experience and why was he more of in a lucky or privileged position, so to speak, and others were not. That's not necessarily a bad way to discuss or to frame the idea that these students are getting this education, to remind them, not that it's a privilege, but just to remind them that it's a gift. It's a good sacred gift that other people are not going to get to take part in. They're well worth it, that's not what I'm thinking, but something to bear in mind. So, yeah, so what the framework of the topic for today is the core habit and core value. How do we see this time? That.
What's the core value again? Oh, is it listening? Listening?
Listening with empathy.
Listening with empathy. Well, I'll tell you what I thought of when I heard it.
Okay.
This is going to be very different than you guys.
Okay.
Well, this echoes actually what John Paul II said in a document called, it's often called, translated, I usually say, on social concerns, what it's usually called. But in the document, John Paul II says that development is never true development unless it's for every human being and everywhere in the world. You can't speak of one person being developed unless everybody's developed. Now, he's using a special term to understand the term development. He's referred back actually to Paul VI. When Paul VI talks about development, he says, what is development? Development is not just material or economic development. Development means the whole person, body and soul. And so he says, what's the lowest level of development? He says there's two aspects of the lowest level of development. The lowest level is the people who don't have the necessities even to live a free life at all, complete poverty. But just as bad are those people whose hearts are hardened by greed and avarice. They are just as slowly developed as these other people here. Then he says, what's the highest level of development? It's when you can live a lifestyle based on the faith and love of Christ, and love everybody else. So when John Paul II says nobody's developed unless everybody's developed, he's really saying, you can't say in America you're a developed country unless everyone else in the world is a developed country, because you're not really loving them. Mm-hmm. You're not really developed at all unless you bring everyone along with you. And so this is what I saw in what he's saying here, but I mean that's because I teach Catholic social thought.
So you're seeing the whole line of Catholic social thought that went into these statements, not just the immediate moment.
That's exactly right. I'm looking at the going back along here. Well, so how would that tie into ultimately listening? Well, this is all part of the teaching here, right? You don't know the needs of other people unless you get to know them. And you can't know them unless you listen to them.
Well, I mean, he talks about the way that Francis puts it is that face-to-face encounter.
Yeah, that's very Francis. Yeah,
very right.
The moment encounter. That's exactly right.
But in fairness, that's probably going to be a way that's going to resonate with our students, because you, in some ways, to talk to our students, you have to speak in terms of the popes of their lives.
Right.
If that makes sense.
That's right.
And the popes of their lifetimes have been
John Paul, Benedict, and Francis.
Right.
That's right.
And and probably John Paul is
starting to edge out, huh?
right.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
2005. How old are they now? John Paul, Benedict started in 2005. And so, what year are the students born now? 2000.
So I honestly don't think John Paul's very.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's very relevant. I don't mean not relevant to them, but I mean he's not a pope of their life so much anymore. Yeah. But the popes that resonate most with the students will be the popes of their lives. He's not so much pope of their life.
Oh. So you're saying I should quote Caritas and Veritatis?
No, well, no, you should do whatever you want.
It does the same thing.
I know, but I'm just saying, and that was the same, that was my experience as a student, was when a teacher would refer to popes that went out of my life.
You did.
It didn't land. It didn't land as much. It just, because if you've seen them and they're alive, it just matters more. I don't know. To me, it did. I wonder if that would be the case. Okay, so what about if we're still talking about this idea of listening? What about how he says the second one is how wonderful it would be if the growth of scientific and technological innovation would come along with more equality and social inclusion. So I think think this exactly ties with what you were saying, this idea of development.
Right, that's exactly right. So then this reminded me of part 3 of Laudato Si, which Francis did right. Which is the part on technology, where he's very worried we live in what he calls a technocratic paradigm world, where we're way more concerned about things than we are people.
And he talked about a culture of waste.
Yeah, that's a
Yes.
precise word he uses in the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Culture of waste, and he talks about it's not just the things, but also of people. But one of the things I thought was really striking in this part was he said, and I even jotted this down, he said, love requires creative, concrete, and ingenious attitude. In other words, he specifically was saying that some of the things, some of the solutions that we've had, approaches that we've had that maybe ourselves, to your conscience, are not going to be effective. It calls for more. And I'm sure this is not new.
No, right. Yeah.
But then again, if it's sometimes it takes a new and striking way of saying it that will make it resonate. But and maybe this would be where we could ask the students what they think about the Pope doing a TED Talk. I mean, what's their impression of TED Talks?
True. Those
And
are
the Pope-
new ways.
And the Pope actually giving a TED Talk. Is this one of those new?
I wondered about that. Did Ted come to him, or did he go find Ted?
I think Ted came to him,
Ted came to him.
but I'm not 100% sure. But I think Ted approached him. And Ted's not a guy, but Ted, the guy Ted. I think Ted approached him, I believe, but I would have to double check on it. But I mean, but that seems to me like he's trying to.
Oh, sure, yeah. He's the first pope to have a selfie. He's the first pope to do all
Well,
these
but
things.
yeah, I mean,
Because I remember saying it was a surprise TED Talk.
Oh,
Because
they were.
when Eddie sent that article, there was something from, like I came across something from Time magazine that said that it referred to it as, keep talking.
Okay. But I mean, it certainly is trying to, and also maybe trying to reach a broader audience too, perhaps. In this discussion. But TED Talks are really popular, beyond just.
actually, I've never seen a TED Talk before. This is my first time ever.
Really watching a TED Talk? Well, the students watch TED Talks a
They
lot.
do.
Do they?
They do.
They're always telling me to watch them.
Like, about what?
Anything and everything.
Yeah.
There's TED Talks on a variety of subjects.
There was one, well, because I had just watched one a couple of days ago on that French photographer JR because there was a 60 Minutes story on him, and he's the one that goes and puts the big photographs on buildings, and I was kind of thinking about this in terms of what he did. But he started out, he lived in the suburbs, like in a bad neighborhood, and he would do graffiti. And he was like, I was really bad at graffiti. And somehow he stole a camera and he became a photographer. And he realized like photography, it lets people be seen, and the people in his neighborhood and everything, that they were so excited to have their pictures done and to be seen. And so that's what he does, these giant pictures, puts them on buildings and stuff to let people who are invisible be seen. Yeah, and it's like, and I was thinking about that, reading this about the whole, like, that people are waste, that they're just masses of people that are just disposable, and it just gives them this one, second of visibility and permanence, and then they feel human. They feel human in that. But anyway, so yeah, I mean that's an example of what So a lot of different just stuff.
An expert in the field will talk about, and they're usually brief. They vary, like from 15 minutes to.
But it seems like the ones they always recommend are shorter.
Because this one was, 17 minutes long or something?
And they're pretty carefully vetted to whoever gives them this.
They know they're an expert.
Yeah, they're really good, usually on a variety of subjects. I don't know. I've used one for the different incarnations of the BC experience, just because they're short and can get.
Oh, I see. So like in class.
Oh, not in class. I've assigned it as an assignment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just wanting to get them to understand really some concept or something, or get them thinking about something, it can be effective. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk to the cameraman, but have you used TED Talks as well?
Yeah, lots, yeah. We sometimes use them in reporting classes where we'll play and they'll have to do like, they're taking notes at a meeting or something like that. And I just watch them personally because I find it fascinating. Because TED is what? Technology, education, and what's the D? I don't remember. It's something like that, but it's on a... They're worth browsing through, yeah, because they're really fascinating, really
You'll have to
inspirational.
look at TED Talks
Now, are we
now.
still doing TED Talks?
I guess so. Well, I need to know this actually before I do this section in the class though, right? If I have no idea what a TED Talk is.
Well, that's why that was so interesting, is they do get experts, but then it's absolutely okay, appropriate for the Pope to give a TED Talk, but it was just,
sure.
Right.
It's interesting that he chose that name.
Right, yeah.
I have a friend that did a TED Talk she went through this vetting process that you have to memorize, and it's all these different.
So did the Pope memorize this?
He did. You could tell he was reading, but typically it has to be memorized, and you're on a stage, and you're mic'd.
But he had it in front of him, but I looked at, he spent most of his time.
I thought that maybe he had a teleprompter.
I thought it looked like that too.
I thought he had a teleprompter, but I mean, fair enough. He's the Pope. I don't think they're going to make him.
No.
But the rules are typically, they want it to be. Yeah, she was giving hers on cutting edge educational stuff in mathematics education. So she gave one. It's kind of prestigious if you get to do it. All right, let's just.
Well, then when they call, I won't hang up.
Yeah, if Ted calls you, don't say no.
Don't say no.
Good idea.
Don't say no to Ted.
Ted who?
For what it's worth, you can actually buy books on how to structure and deliver one. It teaches, it's a storytelling technique.
And you apply. You have to
Yeah.
apply, and it's rigorous.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It really is.
Okay.
The glory of the Ted. Okay, so what about the final point was the revolution of tenderness? And he says, he defines, his one definition of tenderness he gave was love that comes close and becomes real. So how would tenderness, this revolution of tenderness, relate to the value, the habit that we're talking about here, which is listening with empathy. One of the things that when we were really working with empathy, for one thing, we really tried to make clear what empathy was as distinct from pity. We wanted to make sure that distinction was clear, and we wanted to make sure that empathy was understood as more than just an emotional thing, but was understood intellectually also as entertaining, more than entertaining, but taking on board ideas that were maybe new to you and uncomfortable, and being, I don't know if I want to say open-minded and not judgmental, but being not threatened so that you can engage with things that are new and evaluate them and use your judgment on them. I don't know if you had a chance to read through that, but that's what we were really going for in the description. So how would that relate to tenderness and love?
Well, I think because I was just trying, he distinguishes between tenderness. He talks about tenderness in the context of power, right? And and so I think tenderness, it assumes a mutuality and
A respect.
and tenderness is a kind of caring. So there is a power dynamic there, but it's a giving, and it goes back to it's a giving caring. I think it goes back to what he talks about love, that you're not loving unless, what does he say? You're giving of your,
It is at
one
their
cannot
own
love
expense.
unless it is at their own expense. And I think that, ties in with tenderness, that you have to be giving of yourself in order to, I'm not quite sure on what the dynamic there is, the connection between tenderness and power.
I sort of latched on to the beginning of this, and I guess I missed I latched on to this part of the revolution part of that statement more.
Yeah.
So it just takes one, and then one becomes the us. And I wrote to the side, politics aside, these Parkland students that, warn, they were individuals that came together, and then next thing you know, these big companies, and maybe this is where Dick's Sporting Goods and Walmart are changing their whole, things, because there was this one revolution that became bigger.
And he talked about hope, right? He talked about the
Yeah,
us.
exactly. The future
I
does have a
becomes-
name.
Yeah, the future you. He's using these words like the I becomes
Yeah.
us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you get this revolution that started with the individual.
And that builds to hope.
Exactly.
Right.
And I feel like that was just one because it was in the news yesterday, but I feel like there's probably a lot of historical examples that,
You could ask the students to maybe to try and think of
although
words.
I couldn't think of any off the top of my head.
No, but that
Well,
would be
there's so
worth-
few, because we're just corrupt people, if tenderness is leading with humility and guiding with humility, you don't see a lot of that in our political world or in our social world. You don't see much of it.
But I think it's one of the things as we in the committee were talking about this idea of listening, and we were really seeing this level of this listening with empathy is having built on some of these previous things we've talked about. To listen with empathy, you have to come into it with humility. It takes this investment of time, and we were just kind of seeing this building to this with some of the other things that we talked about. Like, you can't listen with empathy if you haven't already talked about humility. And that's kind of, I think one point you talked about, do we think about the sequence? We kind of did. We were sort of seeing a building to this.
Right.
And I think there's some pieces that could be negotiated as far as, but we thought humility made sense before you would get to this. And,
Sure.
And refreshment, so humility was back when we talked about.
The St. Benedict
It's
reading.
a rule.
Right.
That's right.
Um,
In which I read the whole thing and didn't realize it wasn't all history. The rest of you hadn't read as much as me, and probably left all of you wondering, what is he even talking about?
it's an idea of the other person being, and this idea of it being an act of love and making, the face-to-face encounter, that would be what real listening was, but the humility and the willingness to set aside your...
There was one, and the whole thing of listening, and will environmentize, and her and on Bode, there's, do you say on Bode or on Bode?
I say about.
On Bode, okay. There's a story about how when she's here, and she's working in a lab over the summer. She's working in a lab in Kansas City. That story where someone invites her to go to a Louis Farrakhan type, black nationalist thing.
Sure, Black
and she,
Power Rally.
Black Power Rally, and and there's all of this stuff, like Jesus was black, and they invite her to go to that, and she goes to her priest, and she's like, they were saying all of these crazy things, and he's like, we'll go back and listen to what they're saying, and then correct them, he's like, you can't just react. You have to listen and then engage. So
Yeah, I do remember that.
I thought that was I've used that before with my BC experience kind of things. And I think that's valuable for our freshmen, right? Like they get these ideas and they're so reactive, and it's like, and that's where empathy comes in. Well, you have to listen and see where they're coming from, and then you engage. But you can't just be reactive.
So does tenderness always imply intimacy?
Yeah, I think so, right?
How are you using the word intimacy?
Well, I guess that's a good question too. But intimacy, I think, refers to a certain familiarness of somebody else. And so clearly a loving relationship, generally speaking, right? But not just, it's not a love from afar, it's a love that's much closer. And I think that's the way I would use the term intimacy. Does tenderness always imply that or not? That's what I'm wondering in my mind here.
In my mind, it does. It was that connection, right? And that goes back to what he's really saying, that we're all connected, and so we have to have have caring and connectedness and on our interactions with others.
Yeah.
It is to me, I mean,
You don't think so, Julie?
I'm thinking
You're
it through.
thinking it through,
I'm
too?
sorry, I'm really thinking it through because,
I don't know that
So
it's a
should
big
we-
deal, but I do think it makes a little difference if we,
then we define what tenderness
because,
is.
yeah, and he says tenderness is a love that comes close and becomes real.
so he
He
does.
talks about this face to face. For him, I think he is saying that.
Mhm.
But I guess, yes, that's what he's saying. I guess I had thought of tenderness as being, that's probably not how I had understood it though.
Hmm. Well, that was a legitimate question. I'm like, I wasn't trying to lead you or anything.
No, I
really
I
asking.
legitimately was trying to think it through because I think I was thinking of tenderness as kind of a gentleness and a kindness.
Yeah.
And in that sense, no, I think you can be kind and gentle to someone that you don't know very well at all.
Mhm.
Like if you see, like if I see an elderly woman fall to
Right,
the
you
ground,
could be tender.
I can go over and be tender to her, help her to her feet, and are you okay, and be very solicitous, and I'm being very tender. And that in my mind was tenderness, but that I don't think is what he's
But
talking
now
about.
we've just made an intimate connection with her, so now they're.
Yeah, so see, I don't know
Their
that,
intimacy because it was, in other words, is it always need, in his understanding of encounter, I think it's true. And that it probably does imply intimacy.
so now is that now an intimate relationship now? I mean, maybe, have I made a connection with that person? Possibly, but is it love?
Well, yeah,
It is an act of love to help.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So maybe it is, yeah.
See what I think, see tenderness, this is actually a more of a Pope Francis word. All the rest of the stuff you can trace back to other popes, right? But this is more a Pope Francis type of thing. And so when I think tenderness, well, where does that come from in the tradition? Well, that's a very biblical word. It's often applied to God. And, you know, God's tender love for the Israelites.
And how would it have been used in that context? I mean, what would that have meant?
Well, I mean, this is that's a much longer answer, but it has to do with the fact that in the Old Testament itself, you've got contrasting understandings of God going on. And in the prophets where you're going to hear God's tender love, you're not going to really hear this in like the Pentateuch near as much. They're trying to correct that understanding of the distant, aloof God to a more tender, loving God. A good image of this might be in, I think it's Hosea 11 or 12, where God is speaking to Israel as if Israel is its child. And he says, I will forget about your sinful past, and I will pick you up as a father cuddles his child to his cheek. And it gives you the picture of you know, you can think of, you know, a kindly big Jewish man, maybe like a Davy or something, you know, just picking up his child and nuzzling his child there, and he says, I am your God like that, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And so this is what I'm kind of thinking of when he says tenderness. I'm thinking, well, where's that coming from the tradition? And I think that does go along with the power idea. That if we've got the most powerful being in the world who doesn't come to us anymore in a very, because that's the other contrasting idea of God in the Old Testament, though, right? He's all powerful. What you do it because he says so. It doesn't matter whether it, you know, is good or bad or makes you happy. He can kill you otherwise. Right? But that's not the kind of God we have. And of course the prophets are leading up to Jesus,
Right.
where Jesus is meant to be the intimate God.
Right.
And so that's why my question is really, does it always imply an intimacy? Is this?
Well, yeah, and then he specifically mentions Jesus as the example in the
Right.
TED Talk. I mean, he talks about, when he's talking about parents getting down on the level with their children, and he specifically then goes to the example of, you know, God becoming man as
Right.
Jesus, as an example of that very type of tenderness, right? Which I thought was really
Right.
striking.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that maybe is where he's,
That's maybe where it's coming from then.
right, that tender, that is this. So when he's saying love that becomes close and becomes real, for him, that in his mind, the ultimate example of tenderness is God becoming man.
It's got to be.
I think that was what he was saying. And so I mean, so really, he's calling for us to imitate Christ and sort of a humbleness that humility.
But also in intimate relationships with others.
Yes, but a humbling of self to do that.
See, one thing that he did when he was in Buenos Aires is he was worried that people, if they had to go too far to Mass, they wouldn't come. So he would literally establish houses of catechists every half a mile throughout the whole city, so that everybody was always a half a mile away from somebody, so they could, who represented in a sense, the church. So there's always a key chance of a personal encounter. And so that's why I said Tenderness is a very Francis way of thinking. His whole personal encounter.
And I mean, also, this is how he operates, right? He likes to be amongst. I mean, John Paul II did the same thing, though.
He did.
My impression was that Benedict didn't do it as much.
No, it wasn't his
It
personality.
wasn't his style.
It just wasn't his style.
Yeah, and that's fine. John Paul was the same, but.
Benedict was the best writer of the three.
Well, he was a scholar, right? He's a scholar, so, I mean, they have their different.
Well, so is John Paul II.
I mean, they have different.
They did. They all have different personalities.
Sure. And you have different strengths.
Exactly.
But you always see him with,
Yeah.
in the city. I'm tapped out of questions. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to?
You're a great group leaders. That's great.
Yeah. Fun.
Oh my God.
So if you were going to, let's try this. If you were going to do this with your students, so as Christy was saying, when we were talking about doing this with students, we were thinking, because one of the conversations that we very briefly had was, you don't, when you're doing small groups with students, one of the dangers is you don't have a strong facilitator in the group discussions. So we thought maybe having some guide questions and using it more as a role
Right.
model getting into group share. Because I have found anyway that small group discussions can kind of lead to not being very productive after about 10 to 15 minutes.
One thing, and I do it when I do group discussion after, and I got this after I went to that session. I went to a conference last year, and there were like 5 sessions on Socratic circles, but giving them very structured guidelines. You put them in a group. You say, you cannot speak again until everyone has spoken. You ask someone a question, direct a question to them or whatever, but give them very specific guidelines of, how to talk and how to engage in group discussion, which I think also as freshmen is helpful to have.
It's helpful for seniors.
It's helpful for seniors, it is, because otherwise people would just get to sit there and be flies on the wall.
I think that helps within the group, and I found sometimes giving different groups different questions, saying you have a group in charge of this question, you have to present it to the class, and then they feel a little bit more pressure, okay, another group's not going to take over for me, we have to actually answer this.
So everybody's going to report, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Structured environment, everybody reports.
Now that might be, you could deviate people groups on that.
I was looking at some of the examples that were given and the one
Let's
that,
see, part 1, part 2, part 3.
yeah, exactly, that popped up was this empathy museum, because I've never heard of it, and that was sort of.
Oh, that was me.
Was that,
So-
I went and looked though at the website, and then I clicked on one of the examples, and then someone's kid died, and I was like, okay, I'm out of kidding.
No, so what is,
But
yeah,
it still looks really cool. I was
The idea was
interested to know
that-
what
yeah, so it's one of the things, so it's one of these things saying that what's lacking in the upcoming generation is the capacity for empathy. And so it's saying rather than having them, so the empathy museum is where they go and rather than just, they're interactive exhibits and they experience things so that they can, it's hard to explain.
Go ahead and finish, then I was going to ask a question. Finish first.
But what I was saying was, here's this empathy museum, but I wondered if you could do some sort of, I don't know.
Write something from, I sort of like this one. Write a story from a point of view, especially that is totally opposite than what you believe in, so.
Yeah, that was me too.
Yeah, I like that.
I was trying to make
That was
them
cool.
I was trying to make them just do something where they were trying to be.
Especially for our students, I think that's,
Trying to get
hey,
them
why might somebody?
The Empathy Museum was, one of the exhibits that was really interesting was, you go and you have to work as a, oh gosh, what is it where you're like Walmart, third world country where you're assembling clothes?
Retailer, or just
Just a fact.
a soccer, or?
No, you know where they buy all their clothes from China?
Uh-huh.
So a sweatshop worker. You have to go be a sweatshop worker. Couldn't come up with it. So you have to be a sweatshop worker for,
Mhm.
I don't know, it's a fraction of the time that they
Right,
have to work.
okay.
But it's like, this is what it's really like to work in a sweatshop. And that's the Empathy Museum. Is it creates these experiences so that you really see what it would be like to be in this environment as opposed to abstract.
So do you think the lack of empathy comes from the increase of technology, that they're, I guess you'd say they're much more on a phone or a screen? Or does you think it just comes from the fact that we tend to live in gated communities?
I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a combination of factors. I think, I don't know. I mean, then there's a tendency to shelter kids from experiences too, right? We don't want them
Sure.
to. I mean, that's always you don't want them
Right.
Do you think empathy has decreased though? Because by saying that you're.
I don't know, that's
empathy has
what- well, I-
decreased, and I don't know if that's.
Figuring out kind of why this is true would help me figure out what I wanted my students to do, right? To
It's,
increase
I don't
it.
know. The idea is, the stuff that I've read is saying they don't have this, their ability to empathize is decreasing. They
You're
can't.
having me.
They can't put themselves in someone else's position. They can't,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So research shows it has decreased. I
Yeah,
just was curious.
because
if it has.
there's all these parenting articles that are about how am I going to teach my kid to be empathetic?
Mhm.
And these are things that just sort of, I don't know that you actually had to I don't remember ever reading, like, I don't remember ever reading how to do that. These things just sort of happened. Now we have to self-consciously make that happen. It's very strange to me that it's like a missing piece of the puzzle, is empathy.
And that's what I want to know. Is it, or are we saying that it is? And
Yeah, are we now
really-
making something to do that's not there? I don't know. But
I
there-
mean, with us, and there was some pretty, empathetic people at some point then, and I think.
But then have you, yeah, I mean, but have you also,
I don't know.
I'm not doubting it's true. I haven't read anything about this, but I did read a psychological article once which says nobody's good at putting themselves in other people's shoes. That this is in many ways just we think we can do it, but we're not very good at it after
Because
all.
you think we'd be better than ever, because we can see.
Well,
I mean,
but
we used to not.
If relationships are less intimate, there will be less intimacy.
if they're through the internet, but her point is that we can see everything now that we couldn't see, we only could imagine
And we
it.
know all these other.
But now-
Exactly. You can see how terrible it is to live in
The good
Maybe
aspects
you
of
just get
globalization.
overwhelmed. I mean, maybe when you see it
Or
all.
desensitized.
That-
Desensitization would take away
That's
empathy.
the right.
That's true.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know. And again, I don't know if this is just like we're saying that it is the case and it's not. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just curious.
But growing up, there's probably a number of things you did that was just common for families that increased it. I could see following the liturgy and the church would probably increase. You go through your Good Friday and you're taught to be part, share the suffering of Christ and your Lent activities to include other. You understand what I'm saying? It would be built into part of the structure of your life already.
And
Right.
family life, right? Where they're
Yeah,
not thinking,
precisely.
like having to share with your siblings.
Exactly.
But somehow that's not there.
Well, I know my own kids, we have to tell them all the time to.
Sure, but I mean, so clearly it is taught though, right? I mean, your
Yeah,
kids
that's
don't naturally just want to give their toys to their
They
siblings.
don't. You
Of course
gotta
they don't.
teach them that.
Of course
That's right.
It's not innate. It has to be taught, but
Yeah.
but it's somehow they're saying.
But it is more innate for some people.
Well, of course, that's everything, right?
Well, I mean, I
Yeah,
wonder
what do
if
you-
it's tied into just materialism and material gain. So like, let's say, after World War II, materially, after the 50s, we went through very rapid economic
Growth.
Growth.
In the 50s and 60s.
and you
that's
saw
right.
families, falling apart. It went, you know, to me, get, you know, I get mine.
Treat yourself.
And so then, yeah, and then in a family environment, kids don't get those skills, you know.
If it's, yeah, so if it's like, I want this, and then I get it, are they taught to share?
And in the old days,
If there was
kids
not,
always shared rooms by and large.
yeah, if there was privation, then you shared out of necessity.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't enough toys for all to have their own. You shared. There weren't enough rooms. You shared. There
That's
weren't.
right. That's exactly right.
So, I mean, there might be something there. I don't know.
I do think there's an individual push now. I mean, I'm joking about the treat yourself, but I do, you know, you see that all over everything.
Well, and
Treat yourself.
you know, and a lot of what he talks about in our relationships to other ties in so much to economy. You know, that we define our entire economic well-being by the stock market. That is what defines our economic well-being, is growth. Not all of these other things, not education, not poverty, not, you know, none of these other things. That is the one thing that defines what is good in our society.
The default sense of development that
Yeah.
the social encyclicals
Yeah.
are all talking about. That's
Yeah.
not real development.
Right.
The greedy
Right.
person is just as undeveloped as the.
Right, exactly.
That's
And that
right.
type of,
Back to
yeah,
that,
that goes
yeah.
back to what you were saying.
That's right. That's,
You know, and
Right.
that, yeah. So,
I don't know.
what do we do with our kids?
Well, no,
With this article.
But to go back, that's where that came from, that's why I was lobbying this.
Yeah,
but we were
no,
trying-
I liked
I
it.
like
That was
that.
the one that sort of caught my eye, and I was thinking that.
We were trying to come up with different
Ways.
possibilities. But those are all, by the way, just suggestions. If you come up with something
Yeah.
better,
No,
you're welcome to pair this.
I
with
love
other
reading
groups.
those suggestions, so they help. I mean, I usually circle one or two on each one.
yeah, you guys you did a lot of work.
Yeah.
We all were coming from different perspectives.
Mhm.
And we did try and come up with different cortex representing different disciplines too.
Mhm. Well, and different, like, I mean, some of these, I'll be honest, I looked at them like, nope, I would be bored reading it, which is fine, I mean, it's.
Yeah,
But.
no, and that's the other thing, we try to give you guys suggestions from a
Yeah,
variety.
yeah, yeah, and I think, and some people are gonna see that same thing and be like,
Yeah.
that's the best one ever, and that's
Yeah.
how it should be, but.
The plain different.
So we're just doing small groups all day today?
I don't know, I thought we were supposed to reconvene, and I don't know what happened. I thought we were-
reconvene.
I thought we were reconvening after 15
Or
I thought it was like- I
We've
thought
been
it
here
was
about
like-
40 minutes,
I
yeah.
thought it was 15 to 20 minutes, I don't know what happened.
Maybe they went on without us as a way to show empathy.